Greetings all. This is a telling of Joachim Meyer's Art of Sword Combat Dusek section from the 1568 treatise. It is meant to be a supplementary work. That is, you will be doing the solo drilling at the very least. Sparring, meeting with a club would be preferable, but of course you could start just like I did and just find a couple of friends, find a couple of synthetic trainers, or make your own Duseks even, and follow along. But I wanted to have a sort of internet archive of this that is read aloud so that people could, have this in a more digestible format. I know most of my friends don't read much anymore. They listen to a lot of books in audiobook format. Now, these don't make the best audiobooks or the best books to be written through all the way anyways, so I'll try to follow along with some of the techniques as I can, though I am sitting right now. A thorough description of combat with the Dusek to be used with all one-handed weapons. First, there are the guards, which are chiefly 4. These are not made so that you should wait in them, as has been partly said above on the section on the longsword, but much more as categories to help you distinguish one from the other. Namely as follows. When somebody fights from the steer, he will commonly do or use such cuts and techniques as are designed for the steer. Therefore, when you mean to fight an opponent, you shall observe from where the opponent fights against you, to help you know with what cuts or techniques you can best attack him to deprive him of the vor, we would say today. For fighters who deliver their cuts and techniques heedlessly are quickly stopped and must commonly retreat with harm. The 4 guards work like this. The opponent is divided into 4 parts, as has been shown previously. The upper 2 are called the ox, the lower 2 the plow. Now, when you have your weapon high on the right or left, then you are standing in the ox or steer, and whatever you may execute by way of techniques or cuts from the ox, you can also execute the same from all upper postures or guards. And you should not get confused that there are more than 4 named guards, such as steer, wrath, watch. These names arise from the intent and should not be taken as being primary. As, for example, I hold my weapon gathered for a stroke up above my head so that the point extends behind me, which I call the watch. Not that it is not in the ox guard, but because my intention is that with a gathered or prepared stroke, to take heed and watch where his cuts make him open, so that I may be ready to cut at that opening. Thus I may say, he stands in the ox and holds good watch. Note, when someone stands in the wrath guard, I may say he positions himself wrathfully in the ox, and it's already been explained why such names are used. But for now I have explained and taught enough. Next are the cuts, and although I will present or speak of 12 of them, there are no more than 4 chief cuts from which all the others derive. Namely, the first is the high cut, the Oberhau. The second is the wrath cut, Zornhau. The third, the middle cut, Mittelhau. The fourth, a low cut, Unterhau. For no one will ever create or deliver any cut so rare or crooked, but he must bring it from above, diagonally, horizontally, or from below. And the many names and variations of the cuts arise from the diverse intentions of the one who delivers them. For example, when I'm standing in front of an opponent in evenly matched work, and can nowhere come to an opening on him, then I deliver a knocking cut strongly from above. Not that I want to cut or hit him, but rather I knock to him to incite him to cut so that he opens up for me, giving me room for an opening. And although it's a high cut, it's called the knocking cut, not an Oberhau, because my intent is only to knock him to see whether he will open up for me. I'll stop here for a moment and give demonstrations of what he means. This is interesting. It's not exactly the same as his two-handed longsword. So he says, of course, that these guards coming from below, these are all the plow. So this is the plow. If I had my sword fully lowered, that would also be the plow. If I had this sword Here, this would also be the plow, even though we would have more complex names for them. Really, what's important is either my sword's up on my right, up on my left, down on my right, down on my left, and then my intention can be different. Here, my intention may be one of deflecting, parrying, and then looking for that opening. As he says, that knocking cut, which sometimes is shown even with a push with the flat, just to get the guy to where if my weapon's here and you're pushing on that, it's going to get me to do something. So it can be used to break open a very defensive opponent who's very good at parrying and covering. My intention would not be, as in the Wrathguard, to deliver a very powerful cut that I do intend to do, well, real harm with. So this would be ox. This would be our very traditional ox or steer, as he calls it, with the single sword. Ox, thusly on the left side as well. Wrath can only be on the right side, as if we put it on the left side, I can't really lean that way and maintain any sort of good posture. So, let's come back and see what Meyer has to say about the openings. Concerning the 4 openings. Third, you shall heed the openings and learn to recognize them in the opponent's weapon arm. Thus you shall note that when the opponent holds his arm too high, he is open below. When he falls too deep, he is open above. Likewise, when he strays too wide to the side. Further, as to the 4 parts of the combatant, the before and the after, the foible and forte, weak and strong. Note the loop and circle, slicing and such. This is explained at length previously in the section on the longsword. You should also use them here. He's effectively telling us, swords is swords. You don't really need to differentiate, 30 different systems for each weapon, which is something I quite like about Meyer. Here follow the guards, and they are namely the following. Watch, Wacht, or the watchtower, which is not a... Can I show that? That word right there, I'm not going to try to pronounce it. I don't believe it's German, or at least not modern German in any way. Stier, Wrath, Zorn, Bohr, Eber, Change, Wechsel, Sideguard, Nebenhut. The slice, Schnitt, and the bow, Bogen, which are the 2 parings, one from below, the other from above. The cuts, the Oberhau, Mittelhau, Bochhau, the knocking cut, Unterhau, Wecker, or Waker, the Fehler cut, Fellerhau, the Wrath cut, Zornhau, Rohrer, the Brummerhau, short cut, Kurzhau, crooked cut, Krumpau, winding cut, Windhau, and the constrainer cut, or the Zwingerhau. The adjacent illustration shows the routes through the opponent to or through which one cuts. This is referring to, of course, I can either cut, stop, and the point is in your face right now, or I can follow all the way through and carry with momentum, in case I either miss or I need the extra power to be able to blow through the guard. The first line has 3 parts, namely, one on the head and on each arm, as your opponent sweeps around with the cuts. Thus also the Wrath cut is delivered chiefly 3 ways. Firstly, through the face, secondly, through the middle of the opponent, and lastly, through the legs. Yet it remains just one cut from the point of view of the one who cuts it, whether it's to the face, through the middle of the opponent, or through the legs. In summary, whatever goes from above, whether it's cut to the head, arm, or leg, is called a high cut. Whatever is cut from the shoulder diagonally at the opponent, to the face of the body, high or low, it's a Wrath cut. And one can deliver the cut with the crooked or the straight edge. The crooked edge being the false edge, short edge, there's a bunch of different names for it. If you're interested in the diagram, that is thusly. What he is saying here is that as I take the cut here, he says that's a Wrath cut, although it would also be an Oberhau because it's coming from up. That is also a Wrath cut, because it starts from high. Now, if it started from here, then it would be a Mittelhau. If I take this wrath cut and I aim it at my opponent's legs, it's still a wrath cut. Likewise, if I took this guard here, Wechsel, and came up to hit the face, that's an Unterhau. If I hit with the crooked edge to hit the head, well, that's an Oberhau. It's coming over. It's not coming from under, it's coming from a low guard. So I can combine low guards and high attacks. I can combine low guards and low attacks. I can combine high guards, high attacks to the head, high attacks to the hands, stepping off the line, etc. Let's continue a little bit further before I finish this first part. For this reason also, the names of the cuts are diversified, and the names are varied for the limbs to which they cut, as follows hereafter in the section on rapier, and yet the cut remains fundamentally a wrath cut or a middle cut. It works this way with all 4 cuts. Furthermore, note when you deliver one of the 4 cuts through the appropriate line, whether it's above or middle, and then you shall always strike back up the next line to parry. In the onset, if I come in the steer and deliver a middle cut through his face with strength, at once I cut from my left through his lower right line to parry against his hand. Let's stand back up again. I'm in the steer. I cut a middle cut against his head. Then I immediately cut from my left back down at the right to parry his oncoming blow. The fight would obviously go on from here, but this is just one example. Likewise, I could do this with any of the high guards, as Meyer says. Cut the Mittelhau to his head, and I cut at his hand immediately to parry off the line, and then I could line up for a thrust to the center. I could cut a diagonal wrath cut, could cut Oberhau. I could parry yet again if my opponent's faster than me, and then take the Vorback, the before that he mentions. It's up to you in the tempo of the fight, and of course to some extent your opponent. Your opponent will be attempting to enforce his will as well. Now that I've given a general rule covering the entirety of Dusset combat, before I present the techniques and examples which can't take place without combining the guards and cuts along with the pulled cuts, namely deceit, I will explain the cuts as briefly as possible as necessary and teach their counters. We'll start with the 2 basic ones, the high cut, the Oberhau, and the wrath cut, the Zornhau. The high cut counters all other cuts with suppressing or overreaching and always goes through the watch or from the watchtower and is a straightforward yet artful cut to use. The wrath cut is also from above, but with the fundamental distinction that where the other goes straight down, this goes diagonally from the shoulder. And this is the true Vata strike, the father stroke, called the wrath cut or also the battle cut because it is the strongest of all of them. Note, in some other systems it's also called the peasant strike. Pretty self-explanatory. That is, again, straight up and down, diagonally. Then we have the middle cut. The middle cut is a horizontal cut, as it's commonly named. That can be either to the head, to the body, anywhere. The low cut. It's a weak cut, but where it is used with speed, it is very useful. Yeah, you're fighting against gravity, and you have to really link your whole body and posterior chain into it to develop any force with it. The crooked cut is as follows. Reverse your grip so that you hold your dusek crooked. When he cuts or not, step out to the side and cut with the crooked edge, whether it is through the diagonal or horizontal middle line. Now, some of you might be thinking, reverse your grip? Is this the legendary reverse grip? No. Sorry to disappoint you. No, he means from here invert your hand all the way this way. So my elbow is turned all the way out, 180 degrees. So if I was here, I would be all the way here. Then, as a cut is coming this way, thrust or cut, you step well out to the side to evade it. And then with the crooked edge, the short edge, false edge, whatever else you want to call it, you cut to your opponent's blade or their hand if they step really, really close, or you step really, really wide. Boom. And then you have all of your high line cuts. We duck down so you can get that in frame. And then your points on line in case they stepped away. So again, and if you just stand down here and fight like this, an experienced guy's probably going to know what you're about to do. So usually I find that what happens is you'll start in a position like this, be threatening with the point, cut downwards at their hand as you're either retreating or going in, stay here for a bit. Then it's kind of, are you dropping your hand and going to go for the Krumpau, or are you leaving here for the thrust, going to go for the Zwerhau? Again, you're just mixing up targeting the high line, left, right, targeting the low line, left, right, targeting linear attack, following transverse attack. As Meyer says, this is the basis of all Dusset combat. Really, it's the basis of all sword combat, if you want to boil it down even more. I think that's a good place to stop. We'll continue from the crooked cut onward through Meyer's Dusek. It's pretty short. I think it's the section of his book which most clearly follows like a more modern pattern of, yeah, this is like legible as a book from point A to point B. So I thought it would make good audiobook format. Let me know if you like more things like this. Thanks.